It is Monday, October 8th, 2018. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was a very humbling and educational get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Monday. We went through a lot of Neon Belly today, which I happen to enjoy. A little bit of Neon Belly, a lot of passing. And I'll tell you, man, that Monday class is always a challenge for me. You know, because a lot of times I don't get an opportunity to make it in during the weekend. And actually, for me to be able to get in on the weekend, it's like a rare pleasure. But it happens occasionally, but not very often. Anyway, so yeah, that Monday is always a challenge for me to come back to. And let me tell you what, today they really reminded me of exactly where I am with it. You know, it's like there's those times in jiu-jitsu when you're taking classes and, you know, just because you haven't been particularly challenged by anybody for a little while, you start getting a little bit of a, yeah, man, I'm starting to get good at this. Yeah, I can do this. Yeah. And then you have a day like today where, without really trying, your opponents are just stuffing your ass all day long, and kind of brings you back down to reality. Shows you exactly what's what. It's important to have those times, and today was one of those things where it's like I was feeling immediately that my opponent was going to kick my ass. I mean, and not because it was something that was between my ears. It was something that he was showing me. So, you know, I just tried not to get an attitude about it, and just focus on what was happening and where exactly he was getting ahead of me. And I think that's probably an improvement over a lot of the time that I've been training, honestly, that I did take that step and say, okay, I don't give a fuck about winning right now. I just want to see how he's beating me. You know, it's like, how is he, what step is he doing? Where's he offsetting me where it's so easy to open up my guard like this for him? And I did manage to slow him down just a tad towards the end. He wasn't passing me in 5 seconds. It started taking like 7 and 10 seconds. But the point being that, like I said, it was humbling but educational. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people make when they start getting frustrated because they're getting stuffed. And it's easy enough to do, man. I mean, that's no more frustrating thing than, you know, you're trying to get around this guy and you just can't get around him, and you can't get around him, and you can't get around him, and you can't get around him, and then it's his turn and he's just like wham, 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 and fucking passing you left and right. It's like, okay, there's something like fundamentally wrong going on here. And you know, like I said, I think it's one of those things where I've had a period go by where I have not been particularly challenged by my opponents, and I happened to pair up with a guy today who was very, very intent and on his game, and I can't do anything but tip my hat because the guy does put a lot of effort into it. But yeah, so today, very educational, mildly humbling, but you need that kind of thing. I did really enjoy the work that we did do, though. And another thing I felt today that I really, I felt it in my heart, you know, and it's not something easy for guys to admit to, especially when it comes to like fighting and stuff like that, you know, they're touched sentimentally, you know, or emotionally from something they experience in the gym, and especially not from other guys. Because then it's like, is this sexual or something? No. Anyway, no, what was really touching to me is the amount of encouragement I was receiving from my teammates today. I sometimes find it challenging because I am one of the older people in my class, and you know, but I do try and put my effort forward, and you know, I think that reflects well on me in the eyes of my teammates, because when it comes down to a time where, you know, I'm not feeling like I can really push as hard as I want to, or I'm not I'm not able to perform as well as I want to, they're always there, going, hey man, you want to work in with us? You want to take in? You want to join in with us? Because I didn't have a partner at one of them, and for one of the exercises we did today, and I'm like, fuck yeah, man. I mean, and so like I said, I think that's one of those things where it takes a moment or two to reflect back on it to really have it sink in, but I certainly do appreciate that kind of support. It's a hard enough thing to find out there, and when you receive it, or at least when I receive it, I consider it like a reflection back of what kind of effort I do dedicate to my jiu-jitsu. Is that these guys are like, hey man, we know you're serious about this shit, we roll with you all the time, so get your ass back on the mat here with us. Come on, let's go. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down into some music. And you know what? We have not done an opening dance or first dance with body count in a long time. And I'm feeling like this is the kind of week that we're going to have. And so let's go ahead and set the tone. Ski Mask Way by Body Count First Dance here on Coin Metal.
Police are hunting for 2 suspects in a violent home invasion. They are worried that these men may strike again.
And that was Slipknot with Wait and Bleed. God damn it, my mic was loose. Yeah. Interesting day. Looking at this this thread concerning, I guess, some sort of mesh networking protocol that works with some sort of shit with Bitcoin. Blah, 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 offline. Just reading through here, apparently it's designed to do with Samurai wallets, some sort of offline transactions. Okay, yeah. Unless you're initiating the transaction on the blockchain, you're not in control of it. If the hub is initiating the transaction for you, they are in control of it. So go fuck off with that stuff. I have no interest in it. Unless, of course, there are multiple hubs. I don't know. I honestly, I don't have any interest in that. I don't. We came to Bitcoin in order to get away from the need for a third party, an arbitrating third party between us and other people. And Charlie Lee, I've been very, very disappointed with him as of late, as he has been trying to metaphorically conjoin the idea of a peer-to-peer transaction and a Lightning Network transaction. And there's been a lot of effort to call miners a third party. And this is not true. This is not true at all. Miners are not a third party. Miners are the network. You broadcast your transaction to the network of miners out there. They include it into a block dispassionately according to the order it's received or how much it's valued or whatever the fuck the criteria may be. And it does change depending on what currency. And that's a metric to keep in mind when you're deciding what currency to use at any one time for any particular purpose. But anyway, there's been this false equivocation narrative going on where people have been trying to say that Lightning Network transactions are peer-to-peer, and this is not true at all. I mean, you can have 2 nodes in the payment channel. You're not necessarily peers, though. And your transactions, although you may be sending some funds from you to another peer on the payment channel, that does not mean that the transaction will finally settle. And this is a point that I think a lot of these monkeys are forgetting. That the difference between Bitcoin and, say, Visa, all right? Visa, once it's in their systems and it's being transacted by them for you, those transactions take anywhere from days to weeks to possibly even months, depending on the type of transaction it is, to finally settle. with a Bitcoin, a traditional Bitcoin transaction, when there's plenty of room in the blocks for your transaction, which apparently there is these days because hardly anyone's really using it. When you're doing a transaction on chain, and the way it's supposed to work is this: that you do the transaction, you wait approximately 10 minutes for your transaction to be included into a block and for you to get your first confirmation. When the next block is issued, you get confirmation. And so by 6 confirmations in, that's pretty much, etched in stone. Although 1 is just as good. I mean, as far as a transaction between you and a retailer is concerned, one confirmation is more than enough. As a matter of fact, the appearance of the transaction in the mempool, while not being an absolute certainty to be included in a block, will most likely eventually be included in a block. So if you can see it on the network, you can pretty much walk away from it. Because the transaction has been initiated, that the transaction has actually been received by the network, and that it will eventually, possibly, if it doesn't get eventually bounced, be included in a block. Now, you don't have that kind of guarantee with a Lightning Network transaction. Because for all you know, the transaction that initiated the payment channel that you're currently occupying is going to be open for days, weeks, months, years, decades. You do not know. And this is a point where I think a lot of these guys are missing it. And they're looking at just what's going on right now, okay, and trying to say, oh yeah, this is how it's going to be tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and that's just not true. If we look at just Bitcoin mining alone, initially it was done on CPUs, and about 80 to 90% of it was happening here in the United States. Now look at mining. 10 years down the road, how many people are mining with CPUs? Probably not very many. What about GPUs? How many people are mining Bitcoin with GPUs? Probably not that many. What about ASICs? Yeah, there's some independent miners out there, but the vast majority of them out there that are doing so profitably are mining with big warehouses full of ASICs. Now, imagine the same development path except with Lightning nodes, where today, you're running a Lightning node on a relatively cheap machine. And, it's sucking up a little bit of electricity, but the offset in savings versus using a Visa for transacting is enough for you to bother. Now, I don't know anybody that can say that. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that hardly anybody can say that. And there's a point to that. If you look at the way that it's supposed to operate, it's not supposed to have you in it. It's supposed to have you and Visa. And Visa will be the one that is maintaining the payment channel. And when you do your transaction, it'll be with Visa. That's it. And you'll be transacting in IOUs off-chain. And I don't know why I have to explain this to people on Twitter, and I really don't know why I'm hearing this bullshit coming out of fucking Charlie's mouth concerning Lightning networks being quote-unquote peer-to-peer. They're not peer-to-peer, and he can just fuck off with that bullshit. That false equivocation just confuses people. They start believing that bullshit, taking it literally, and it is not literal. It's when I saw that tweet come up on my fucking feed, you know what I responded to him as? I said, yeah, there's one problem. the peer-to-peer shit that you're doing on a fucking Lightning Network is being facilitated by a third party. That's not true with a Bitcoin transaction. An on-chain Bitcoin transaction is you and the network. You know, especially if you're running your own node, as some maximalist had preached for such a long time, to how radically important it was that you run your own full node. You know, no trust, and that's fine. That's a good way to go about things. Let's see here. Recommend. Oh, sorry, I was looking at my responses here on Twitter, but anyway, yeah, you should not need to run a fucking Lightning node in order to do a transaction on Bitcoin or with Bitcoin, and if you do need to, then there's something wrong. I'm pretty sure in the not so distant future all this shit's really gonna sort itself out. I think in the longer term, it's going to become really obvious that the centralization that we've noted in Bitcoin mining will be 80,000 times more dangerous when it's occurring in the processing of Bitcoin transactions. And this is something I think all of these guys just like, it's like it's in one ear and out the other. It's like, oh, big whoop-de-doo, it's all being facilitated by a hub. This is a hub and spoke model, big whoop-de-doo. And just walk on, like, that doesn't mean anything, right? It's not like the hub really has a choice or anything, right? I mean, they can't actually discriminate between transactions now, can they? Yes, they can. How about this? How about that hub that sucks up all of the transactions coming just because of the fees, you know, the fee rates? So all the facilitators that are doing this shit, they're licensed with that hub, right? And they've got a little piece of taint on their transactions to the hub that if you don't have that, then you're not licensed. And if you're not licensed, then your transactions aren't going to go through. Yeah. They can already ignore your nodes and just avoid doing any transactions with you. But you've got to like bank on the idea that eventually your transaction is going to get routed around to where it gets to some vendor out there that's attached out there that will facilitate your transaction. And I'm here to tell you that's bullshit. That there are probably multinational campaigns coordinated to where the majority of transactions, or even a significant amount of transactions, not even a majority, just a significant amount, maybe 10-15% of transactions go off chain. These people are going to kick into gear. And they've been accumulating Bitcoin this whole time so that they're going to be able to host payment channels of significant sums, or host significant sums on their hubs to facilitate transactions just out of the goodness of their own heart, right? Yeah, whatever. You're going to be hosting millions of fucking dollars up there. Now, of course, there's the people that say, yeah, let them do that, because then we can hack it, right? And then what's going to happen? All of these rumors and whispers about regulation in the whole Lightning Network schema, those are going to become solid and concrete. And they're going to be having guns and jackboots and all that other shit to do the enforcement on it. Because Goldman Sachs lost $10 million in Bitcoin because their fucking node got hacked or whatever. It's not going to take very much. I mean, that's all it took for the SEC and the CFTC and all those guys to start sniffing around cryptocurrency exchanges, was that, you know, people lost money. There were significant losses of money. They didn't give a fuck about us before, like Mt. Gox. They didn't give a fuck. Then people lose a few $100 million, and all of a sudden it's time to take it seriously, right? When they'll wait, just wait until that shit happens in Lightning. It's just fucking silliness. So I caught on to this article here, and I'm starting to think I need to be looking for other sources other than Bitcoin.com for articles. Now, this isn't anything against Roger personally, except for the one thing that I keep jumping up and down on, because I think it's just so fucking egregious, is that you can download a free Bitcoin.com wallet, right? Well, you need a Gmail account to do that. And you need a phone number for a Gmail account. So now imagine how much personal information is being given up here to Google, or how much you're being forced to give up to Google, just so you can get a Bitcoin.com wallet. That's just bullshit. And I mean, I either like Roger doesn't know, or he just ignores it, or this is a significant source of money for him. It could be any one of the three here. And just so you know, this is for all you who've accused me over the years of being a fucking shill for Bitcoin or Cash or Roger or whatever. Dude, I like policy consistency. Okay, if you tell me that you're about privacy, if you tell me that you're about self-sovereignty, you know, if you tell me that you're against censorship in transactions or discrimination in transactions, if you tell me that you're about liberty and you're about freedom, then the last thing you're gonna fucking do is demand that I give my fucking personal information to Google. This is a policy inconsistency that just drives me fucking nuts. I'm going to start looking around for a better Bitcoin Cash wallet. I mean, because I'm sure there's one out there. And if there isn't, by golly, I want to start working on one. Because Bitcoin Cash can fulfill on the promises that were made with regard to Bitcoin as is. You know, and this is without even talking about quote-unquote scaling. I mean, I find it really amazing that, you know, nobody talks about building on the U.S. dollar. You know, nobody talks about building on the Turkish lira. We don't need to build on top of these things because, you know, they're there already, right? And Visa isn't building on top of these things. They just facilitate transactions in them. And what's great about it is we don't even have to ask permission to develop new ways to do it. But for some reason, there's this idea you got to corral people into it. You know, I don't get it. I just don't get it. Anyway, got this article here on Bitcoin.com. And it's by Kai Sedgwick. Let's check and verify something here. Kai. Yes. Penis. So here it is. Blockstream's Liquid network could be vulnerable to hardware backdoors. Yeah, your cell phone could be vulnerable to a hardware backdoor for that matter. Keep it in mind. Bitcoin technology company Blockstream has conceded its flagship Liquid network could be susceptible to hardware vulnerabilities. Following recent disclosures that certain Chinese-manufactured motherboards contain backdoors, Blockstream has authored a post conceding that such an exploit could allow an attacker to infiltrate their off-chain Bitcoin transfer system. And I'd like to just take a moment to point out there, that's a vulnerability that they introduced. That's right. You don't need this Liquid network in order to use your fucking Bitcoin. But if you use it, you're going to be vulnerable to this exploit. So here we go. Quote, during the Liquid functionary server design process, we knew that the threat of compromised hardware was a legitimate concern, conceded Blockstream in a post authored on Thursday. In designing Liquid, a commercial second-layer Bitcoin solution, the controversial company has had to assemble components that include a proprietary key module connected to a server. Should the private key data be leaked, potentially through a backdoored computer chip, huge losses could be incurred. Once fully operational, Blockstream is planning for Liquid to be responsible for funneling huge amounts of Bitcoin between cryptocurrency exchanges. Such transfers have always been performed on-chain, but the introduction of Blockstream's own network could unwittingly expose the Bitcoin ecosystem to a new attack vector. While such an attack would require sophistication to pull off, the rewards of successfully infiltrating the Liquid network, such as through a hardware backdoor, could incentivize state-sponsored hackers to attempt such a feat. The company conceded, quote, "While there is no indication that our motherboards were compromised, we cannot rule out this possibility." Blockstream initiates third-party security audit. As a precautionary measure, Blockstream is to commission a security audit of its hardware modules to determine whether they are at risk from so-called supermicro vulnerability that might have exposed around 30 US companies, including Apple and Amazon, to Chinese spies. Quote, "We will ship a sample of our motherboards to a third-party security company for extensive examination," wrote Blockstream. Quote, "Moving forward, we are continuing our risk mitigation strategy for hardware threats through a variety of techniques, including increasing our supplier diversity so that no single compromised vendor would adversely affect the Liquid network." Blockstream finished by asserting, quote, "We believe that the supermicro vulnerability, if independently confirmed and if present on our servers, is mitigated by other aspects of the Liquid security design. While the company has every incentive to rigorously screen its hardware for threats and to take robust measures to mitigate these, the mere possibility of Bitcoin being compromised in such a fashion is a cause for concern." No shit. Bitcoin was initially designed so that all transactions could be performed on-chain, making them fully auditable on a public ledger. With the transparency this provides, ensures complete accountability for counterparties. In the event of one entity's computer being compromised in some way, they could conceivably lose their coins. But the Bitcoin network would remain unaffected. Liquid, on the other hand, is intended to run on side chains, quote, "allowing traders and market makers to move their Bitcoin holdings instantly within the network." Such a provision may be beneficial for participants, but a fatal hardware flaw could have ramifications that impact upon the entire Liquid ecosystem. Having been under development since 2015, Liquid is a complex and as yet unproven technology. With Blockstream asserting sole control over the project, its centralized nature makes the company a target for the same sort of backdoors that have affected some of America's largest tech companies. Yeah, that's... I will say this much. Some of the authors on here are really taking the time to evaluate it like normally, as opposed to just jumping to conclusions about stuff, and I think that's good. I mean, there's more than enough scaremongering in this ecosystem. But yeah, I think this is one of those bugaboos that the maximalists harp upon at ad nauseum, and that's centralization. There are definitely threat vectors that are introduced and are usually allowed to incubate for a little while until they can do some real fucking damage when they're based on proprietary hardware and software. Like Microsoft. There were a shit ton of vulnerabilities that did not make themselves notable until Microsoft's operating systems were released. And I'm talking about Windows 95, Windows 98. I mean, these had a reputation for being buggy as fuck, and basically we figured out that Microsoft was hardly even bothering to QA the stuff. It's like, does the fucking thing work reasonably well? Okay, release it and see what happens. And then people would find all these bugs and fatal errors and shit. And I could swear they had at least one recall where they had to recall all of it, because all the copies that they had out on the market. Although I'm not entirely certain when that happened, but I could swear it happened somewhere in a release between Windows 95 and Windows 98, where it was just such a catastrophic error. They're like, yeah, just pull all the hard copies, man. we'll clean up what's actually online via patching and whatnot, but there's no way to patch all these software that's on people's shelves. So, in any case, this is all. If you go back to before we even had graphic user interfaces, you know, where we're still looking at, you know, black and green, black and amber, blue and white on our monitors. If you go back to then and you extrapolate forward, back then, before there was this push to license software and have software licensing and all this other bullshit, there was a big push to keep it open. You know, if you go back then, you had the homebrew movement, and if you watch like the Pirates of Silicon Valley or any of those movies concerning the history of either Microsoft or Apple, you find this, that there was a very, very open nature to the whole homebrew movement. And, you know, there was a lot of fuckery in there too, but, you know, they're having fun with a lot of it. But if you go back then, the idea was, in fact, to share shit. You know, quit trying to impede one another with the kind of intellectual protections that we have with copyright and all that, because it was recognized that these are anti-competitive measures. You know, somebody was trying to tell me that getting patents and copyrights and all that's good for competition. No, it's not. See, if you're willing to compete, you're willing to put your code out there and say, here's the code. This is the rules I'm playing by. Come on and see if you can do it better. That's competing. Not competing is saying, this is my code. Fuck you. You can't copy it. You can't do anything with it other than run it. You're a serf. You're a slave. You're an end user. What kind of relationship would you rather have here? You want to be a little slave, or you want to be somebody who can take up the code, look the inventor of it square in the eyes, and say, I can do it better, and then prove it? Which one is more competitive, do you think? Shit, man. If the guy's handing me the code, and I have the opportunity to do it just as well, if not better than him with his own shit, I'm going to fucking take that opportunity. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down into some music. And I've been thinking about a little Infectious Grooves. Here we go. Punk it up. Here on Coin Metal. And that was Between the Buried and Me. Yellow Eyes. And so, let's get back into it. I got a few articles now. I've actually managed to accumulate a few while I got you distracted with the awesome fucking music. And so, I saw this one on Twitter and I kind of had to laugh to myself. A lot of people forget this about crypto, that it was actually created in response to abuse of the market by entrenched legacy financial interests. And if you doubt it, look up the Genesis block. There's a little message there associated with the bailout culture that was developing in legacy finance. And so I find it really humorous, especially when I'm reading this on a publication that's dedicated to cryptocurrency specifically. But the idea that the interest of legacy players, of institutional investors, really means jack shit to people that really care about cryptocurrencies it's humorous to me. It really is. Because it presupposes that there's a difference between an institutional investor and you. And when it comes to cryptocurrencies, that isn't true. They have different ways of investing, and they'd like to imagine that they can disassociate themselves from the systemic risk of cryptocurrencies, but they are mistaken. And it's funny to me because, one of the complaints I hear about cryptocurrencies is the volatility. Take a good look at the chart. The volatility is primarily going up. But now, let's put this into context. When we're talking about people using cryptocurrencies in Venezuela, or Argentina, or Bolivia, or Turkey, or Zimbabwe, or Greece, or Portugal, or Spain, or any other place that's going through some economic disaster imposed by their central bank and its operations. And we look at that from the outside and we say, oh, those poor people, good thing they have cryptocurrencies to use, right? But nobody looks at those, at what's going on there, where in Turkey, and I keep talking about this one example because it's so fucking ludicrous to me, that in Turkey, Bitcoin is going for, I haven't checked this in a while, but the last time I checked, it was the equivalent of about $31,000 per Bitcoin in US dollars. Now, think about that a moment. Okay, their currency is losing value so fast and by so much more than us that there's a significant price discrepancy between here and there as far as what the price of Bitcoin is. Because again, we're looking at an exchange rate. We use the US dollar as a barometer in between just to show you where it is. That if you were to buy Bitcoin in Turkish lira, it would cost you the monetary equivalent of 31,000 US dollars in order to buy it. You see, people look at that and they want to blame Turkey. They don't blame Bitcoin for that. But when people in America talk about the volatility of Bitcoin, they blame it on Bitcoin. They don't blame it on the US dollar. They don't associate fiat inflation in the US dollar to the price increase in Bitcoin. Which, if you were to take a map, or a chart rather, of the QE disbursements, back in the Obama era, when we had QE1, QE2, QE3, right? If you were to take that chart and you were to overlap it on top of Bitcoin's chart, you would see that the price jumps in Bitcoin correspond with the volume jumps of US dollars coming into the market via QE. Now, why people can't make this association? I think it's because we've had a bit of distortion going on due to stable coins. See, there's this idea that you can actually associate cryptocurrencies, a cryptocurrency unit, reliably on a 1-to-1 ratio with a fiat currency, and that you can't do it. As soon as you deviate from one volume and you're using an abstraction of that volume, the party that's managing that abstraction will debase it. It's a certainty. Certainty. You could etch it into your forehead just to remind yourself every morning, it is a certainty that they will debase any abstraction of value. And that's including on Bitcoin. You know, when you're talking about the Lightning Network, there have been a couple quote-unquote bugs that have been revealed as of late that are directly introduced via Lightning Network and the infrastructure that they're trying to cobble together in order to manage that one. And we can see that there is being introduced many possibilities for inflating the number of Bitcoin in circulation, either through abstraction or through direct time warp attacks. And from what I can tell, it only looks like they're trying to propagate the number of those these days. So, you know, I think it's really funny when people bitch about the fact that the majority of the network still has not upgraded to the latest version of Blockstream software. And they bitch about it because they think that there's something wrong going on there. No, that's something right. The reason it is right, it is because the hardware, the people that are managing the hardware are managing it to their benefit. Not to yours, to their benefit. Now, if you've got a problem with that, what you have to do is compete with them or delete. That means buy some fucking miners, dedicate some electricity and some bandwidth, and hash away. Compete or delete. Meaning, if you don't like the way that the Bitcoin network operates, use another fucking network. Use another cryptocurrency. There's 2,000 of them out there. I am not a maximalist by any means. I believe that cryptocurrencies are here to serve you, not so that you can serve Visa or Goldman Sachs or any of the other entrenched interests that have towered over us for the last 2 centuries, or at least the last century. Bitcoin leveled all of those people to your next door neighbor and his 14-year-old kid. They're all level now. You all got guns. You can all download the code. You can all modify the code. You can all redistribute the code as your own version of Bitcoin or a completely alien coin. You could just look at the examples of the code and say, you know what? I can do it better. And put it to the test. Put it out there, let people download it, dedicate their hardware, their electricity and their bandwidth to it, and let's see how it runs. This is the game that has been introduced to us by Bitcoin. And there are some that would like to limit the number of players, but unfortunately, I think that one of the things that the proliferation of altcoins represented is the fact that there are a number of constituencies out there. Not all of them are represented fully by Bitcoin or directly by Bitcoin. And so we need other altcoins out there to represent them. It wouldn't exist if there wasn't a need. You know, I mean, some people like to harp on the idea that a few devs got together and just cobbled a bunch of alts together and just threw them out there. That may be true. But the fact that they exist now, after 3 to 4 years, that should exemplify the fact that they're probably going to be around for another decade, another 2 decades, probably another century. But it'll all be contingent on whether or not people are interested in being so. I think one of the things that Bitcoin allows is a more driver's seat participation in the global economy. And that's something that we haven't had before. You know, I mean, we had it to some extent with regard to retail markets where we were providing them for one another and where they have been taken over by larger entities. But at the same time, those larger entities, when they take over, they also kick out smaller entities that aren't able to meet their quote-unquote scale. See, their scale is different than your scale, or the market that you're actually servicing. If you're receiving enough demand via your online portals that you're able to sustain yourself, maybe that's enough. Maybe all you need is a marketplace that can satisfy that percentage of the market that actually wants your shit, rather than trying to stuff it in the face of a bunch of other people that probably don't, which imposes a lot of costs that you'd rather not entertain and probably can't afford. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down into some articles here. And the next one I got here is on newsbtc.com. Expert. So you already know it's bullshit. Quote, self-regulation on crypto exchanges not enough to appeal to institutional investors. Like crypto really gives a fuck. And this is by Thomas Delahunty, October 9th, 2018 at 4 a.m. No time zone. Bad Thomas ban. But yes, penis. In the absence of regulatory oversight, crypto insiders are looking for ways to self-regulate in attempts to make the industry more attractive to institutional investors, some of whom are wary of entering the market due to the potential for hacks and fraud. But some experts are calling into question the practicality of these groups. Industry groups look to regulate crypto from the inside out. Yeah, they're gonna fuck off too. Interest among consumers and institutions is undoubtedly growing, but the nascent industry is still plagued by fraud and regulatory uncertainty. As for numbers, in the second quarter of 2018, investors lost $670 million in cryptocurrencies due to hacks and scams, according to Business Insider. In attempts to change this and shine more light on the sometimes opaque crypto market, no, there's nothing opaque about the crypto market. The only opacity is that which you entertain. If you have a question, seriously, there's probably a fucking Discord group for it. There's probably a Telegram group for it. You can probably find it on crypto Twitter or Facebook or any one of a number of fucking social media outlets. There is no opacity with this shit. The only opacity there is can be found with exchanges, but that's because where we trusted them. Anyway, continuing on. As well as push for fair regulations, two new groups have emerged. One is the Virtual Commodity Association, the industry's first self-regulatory organization, which was launched by the Winklevoss twins, the Winklevoss Brothers Gemini Exchange, Bitstamp, Bitflyer USA, and Bittrex this last August. The second group, the Blockchain Association, is comprised of companies like Coinbase, Circle, Digital Currency Group, Polychain Capital, Protolabs, and Zcash, and focuses on topics such as tax treatment of tokens and consumer protection. Fuck yourself! While many say the establishment of the VCA and other groups is a step in the right direction, some skeptics, like Joseph Marino, a partner at Cadwallader's White Collar Defense and Investigations Group, say the idea of self-regulatory organizations may not be very effective. Quote, "There's no teeth in an SRO if there's not a regulatory body behind it. It doesn't look to be very effective without statutory authority." And you know what, dude? You're correct, but I'll go even further. Even with statutory authority, it won't be effective. Marino contrasts the self-regulating nature of the VCA with that of Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA, a self-governing body which is authorized by Congress and supervised by the Securities and Exchange Commission. FINRA, thanks to its direct connection with the federal government, can take a variety of steps against cryptocurrency service providers it believes to be operating on the wrong side of the law. Self-regulatory groups, on the other hand, quote, will not have any governmental-like regulatory authority to bring enforcement actions or levy fines, Moreno says. Does the crypto industry want to self-regulate? Dude, we have been self-regulating for the fucking last decade. If we hadn't, there'd be still fucking... Paycoin would still be being run as a fucking scam. Continuing on. Another point to consider is that not everyone in the crypto world is open to self-regulatory organizations like the VCA and the Blockchain Association, which to many go against the concept of decentralization that is at the very core of blockchain-based digital currencies. Quote, part of the charm and fascination of cryptocurrencies, I'm just going to replace that word because that's just a stupid fucking word to be put right there. Charm and fascination of cryptocurrencies is the ability to take out central intermediaries, Moreno said. Quote, within the community, there is a direct natural bias against centralization and giving power over to the central authority. That's correct. That said, there is obvious reasons why these organizations are springing up, as 2018 seeing government forces across the globe looking with increased scrutiny at the industry in attempts to regulate from the outside in. Earlier this year, we saw this in the form of cease and desist orders and even blanket bans against cryptocurrencies and the companies that create them. And in just the past few months, the SEC and FINRA have issued a string of punitive actions against companies involved with digital coins. In response to this, some companies facing undesirable regulatory environments in countries like the US, Japan, and South Korea have moved their entire operations to jurisdictions with more favorable and concrete financial climates, like the island nation of Malta. In other words, a place where they really don't give a fuck. Yeah, I think the problem here is that, like it is pointed out in this article, is that there is no real teeth behind any of these organizations. I mean, what are they going to do? Sit there in their fucking chairs and watch social media and rat people out to the SEC and FINRA and CFTC? Oh, hey, these guys are doing something bad. I mean, really? How long are you going to talk to them? How long will it be before you're blocking them from your social media circles or moving to social media circles that they aren't currently monitoring? Not very long. Why? Because it's in your interest to do so. This is the leveling effect, kids. If I can talk to somebody in South Korea, or I can talk to somebody in Vietnam, or I can talk to somebody in Venezuela, or Bolivia, or Bulgaria, or anywhere, I can send money to them. They can send money to me. I can do commerce with them. So again, this idea that you're going to stop it by putting regulatory borders in place is incorrect. Now, see, I know this is kind of contradictory for some people to hear me say, because, you know, the idea that I espouse a lot is that we do not need that kind of regulation in this space. But the fact of the matter is that we do regulate on a individual and market basis. You know, if a cryptocurrency has a shitty reputation, not a lot of exchanges are going to want to carry it. And the ones that do carry it, you have to consider their reputations as suspect. This is plenty of regulation, and it's been working just fine for the last decade. At least half of that decade has had, 500-600 cryptocurrencies from that period to now, and another, I don't know, some estimates put it at like 5,000 cryptocurrencies. I don't know that that's true, but I would say at least 1,500 of them out there that are currently running, currently have networks, so on and so forth. With that level of choice existing, and I think I think we'll probably see another spike in that too, where we see more people coming into this as necessary and going from just surviving to becoming savvy. You know, where they experience a differential in their transaction fee on the Bitcoin network from one month to the next, and they notice it's only getting more expensive to do. They're going to shift to other means. And I don't think that off-chain transactions via the Lightning Network will be the most viable means for them. I think a lot more on-chain transactions via smaller cryptocurrencies would fit the bill. But again, I can't make these statements for other people. You know, they have to come to it themselves. Let's see here. Somebody threw me something here. What's that business? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I saw something by Crypto Rec being posted in here, and I wanted to find it. Find it. Where is it? Marcus, right, move it up to the front. Damn it. I'll tell you what, I don't really like Discord. Do not really like it. But it works. Let's see. Where the hell did he put it? Son of a bitch. Oh well. I'll find it when I'm offline. Or at least off of here. So yeah, self-regulation has been pretty much the name of the game for this entire time, and I don't expect that it will be any different another decade from now. And there is another side to this self-regulation business, and it's the issue of what happens with regulation. You know, it's not just us that experience regulation, it's everybody that's been trying cryptocurrencies out. And because... hold on. Gotta check and verify that was the only one. Because it is in our self-interest to do these things, to monitor shit, we're a lot keener on it than we would be if we did have somebody over our shoulder saying stuff, you know, saying, hey, you can't do that, or you should do this. And I think the article is pretty keen on indicating the point about the attractiveness of cryptocurrencies being that they do not run like that. That we do not have somebody from the top dictating down to us. There have been some that have been pushing that kind of mentality with regard to Bitcoin, that they want to force it like that. But I think they're finding out that that's not really what the market wants. And they're starting to look for alternatives to that. The forward blocks thing, that's an attempt at satiating the market demand. But if you look at the offsets that they're promoting, where you have two sets of miners, one dictating to the other, it loses all its appeal, you know? And what I find really humorous is when I hear people that propose and champion those kind of measures talk about decentralization. And even I find it even more humorous when they whine when the entire network doesn't fucking immediately comply to their desires. I mean, it's like, really, dude, what are you expecting here? Do you like decentralization or do you not like decentralization? Well, decentralization means that I have a choice. And if I have a choice, I might just tell you to fuck yourself. And so, yeah, there's this other article, but we're not going to follow that one up because it's from old. But I do have another one here from that I wanted to cover. This one's on CoinDesk. To scale Bitcoin, little improvements will need to go a long way. And this is by Bailey Rutzel, and let's check and verify something. Blah blah blah. No, she. Okay. From all indications, Bailey is a female. So no penis. This is authored on October 9th, so apparently she's a time traveler as well. October 9th, 2018 at 4 UTC. Kaizen, the Japanese word for improvement, and as it relates to business. It's the philosophy of continuous improvement on working practices. And with that is the tagline for the 5th edition of Bitcoin and of the Bitcoin Engineering Conference, Scaling Bitcoin. It became a perfect way to summarize what's happening today among cryptocurrency's developer ecosystem. With the scaling debate coming to a head last year and ending with a group of big block supporting enthusiasts breaking off to form competing cryptocurrency Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin getting the long-awaited code segregated witness that not everybody uses, and the increase of happens to coincide with attrition as opposed to adoption, as I predicted. This year's Scaling Bitcoin conference just didn't have that flair that perhaps past events had. What seemed pulled from another piece of the Kaizen philosophy, the notion of eliminating waste for a lean business. Many of the talks over the 2-day conference held at the Keio University in Tokyo revolved around little updates that could make a big difference in terms of efficiency of the network. From figuring out what to do with the vast amount of so-called dust, an output with tiny pieces of a Bitcoin in them, small enough that the fees for sending eclipse the amount sent on the network, to fine-tuning the Lightning Network, Scaling Bitcoin seemed to present a much more relaxed and focused developer community. Jameson Lopp, a Bitcoin developer and engineer at Bitcoin security startup Casa, agreed. Quote, most of the presentations were of small improvements that seem fairly likely to be implemented, which is arguably preferable to huge overhauls that promise significant improvements but add a lot of complexity and would be contentious, he told CoinDesk, adding, quote, lots of small improvements add up over time to large improvements. Yeah, in other words, you just tweak it until you bait and switch it into something that it wasn't. Still, that doesn't mean the several hundred developers, academics, and Japanese technology enthusiasts in attendance weren't reminded about the potential of the protocol. During the Keio University, Professor Jun Murai's opening keynote, he pointed out that in 2000, only 6% of the world population was using the internet. But by 2017, more than 54% of the global population was online. Quote, when you are developing for the Bitcoin scale, this is what you have to see and think, Murai said. And I'd like to point out also that what we have today is made possible by volunteers, willing volunteer participants. So, if you want to consider that kind of scale, you ought to be considering increasing that participation in order to match. Because otherwise, all you're going to end up with is with centralized businesses that are running it all, and we're back to Visa. Continuing on. Sweep up the dust. One area of small improvements that several presentations touched on was the massive amount of UTXOs, or unspent transaction outputs, especially those holding Bitcoin dust. For Sergey Delgado Segura, a cryptocurrency researcher at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, the question is, quote, how many unspent outputs are actually worth spending? How much space is devoted to storing not worth spending outputs? Looking at the question with 110 satoshis per byte in mind, according to Segura, about 50% of UTXOs are actually dust, meaning those pieces of Bitcoin are unlikely to ever be spent. Quote, this is nothing new. This has been going on since the beginning of the coin, he said, although he added, quote, we are reaching a certain point where this is becoming a real problem. Yeah, it's becoming a real fucking problem because you're limiting us to 1 megabyte of block space. If we had more than 1 megabyte of block space, it would be worth more I mean, it would be worth less per KB, and you wouldn't be experiencing dust at 110 satoshis. Continuing on. This becomes a problem, namely for the user's ability to run a full node. Oh yeah, whatever. Especially in low-resource devices like general-purpose laptops. By storing all these unprofitable UTXOs on the blockchain, full nodes must download and store all this data, even though it's nearly useless. Yeah, you know what? That's part of the fucking job. Deal with it, bitch. As Bitcoin attracts more users, Segura said the amount of dust-based UTXOs will grow, and it will grow unbounded because that's how the system was built. While Segura said that's not because anyone did anything wrong, there does need to be some real thought put into the proposals out there to mitigate this. For one, Segura said, everyone should be consolidating outputs when fees are low, like they are right now. Secondly, a good coin selection algorithm which decides which bits of data come together to create a user's Bitcoin transaction will also help. There are other proposals for this problem as well. For instance, Benedict Bunz proposed using RSA accumulators, a cryptographic one-way function that answers a query about something without revealing all of the individual data points that were used to come up with that answer, or to come to that answer. While Merkle trees have been utilized in the past to allow clients to check that an unspent UTXO is being used without sending the client entire state of the blockchain, RSA accumulators could be a more efficient replacement. During a Bitcoin Core, the most popular Bitcoin software, developer meeting on Monday, October 8th, Taj Drija, a developer and the co-author of the Lightning Network paper, proposed a similar thing. Instead of RSA accumulators, which he said are unproven, he's working on a hash-based accumulator whereby the hash of each UTXO is stored, decreasing the amount of storage by half. Plus, instead of storing all the hashes of every UTXO, Drija wondered whether storing some, quote, compact representation or aggregated bundle of the UTXOs with their proofs would be less cumbersome. According to Lop, cleaning up the UTXO architecture has been discussed on and off for about 6 years, and hopefully with the concept of accumulators, something can be implemented that's efficient. I don't know, are you going to be giving back everybody the UTXOs that were unspent from their transactions? Or are you just going to be accumulating them? For yourself. Praise for Layer 2. As the Lightning Network gains momentum, it's no surprise that the Layer 2 scaling technology for pushing transactions off-chain got a significant amount of time. On day 2 of the conference, Lightning had its own category, representing 3 talks that covered rebalancing, or the idea of closing a channel after a number of transactions have been performed, of Lightning Network channels, Lightning benchmarks, and incentivizing watchtowers, the entities responsible for watching Lightning channels to make sure no fraud occurs. Gosh, who's that going to be? On top of that, other Layer 2 solutions got attention as well. For instance, the incredibly fast-talking style Leolu has become known for. The respected developer and co-founder of Lightning Labs spoke about payment channels more broadly. And not only just one-to-one payment channel, but multi-party payment channels, and channels upon channels. One such topic was so-called, quote, channel factories, which Leolu defined as a, quote, a layered set of transactions of intermediate transactions. So multi-party channels layered on each other, each with their own way of validating transactions. Let's add some more complexity. He also spoke about route tunneling, or the ability to connect users on other layers of the multi-party channel in order to create a specific channel with them. Speaking about the idea, Leolu said, quote, "It's sort of like a new dimension or a new underworld, and you can tunnel them into the third dimension, which I think is pretty cool." This guy's on fucking acid. This, he said, could be used for if, for instance, quote, "the liquidity wasn't sufficient for selling stickers or whatever is cool these days. I can advertise shortcut routes that tunnel through the channel formation. We are able to create new channels in seconds to satisfy directional flow above ground." Other Layer 2 solutions that were touched on at the conference include state chains and a Bitcoin bridge called Niji. Speaking to another difference between this year's scaling Bitcoin and subsequent years, Lops said it was a focus on Lightning and the idea of, quote, "In general, it is going to be easier to make changes on second layers because changes don't require the same level of consensus, if at all." Yeah, in other words, fuck consensus. Who gives a fuck if the miners actually want to mine it? No, we don't give a fuck about that. No, we're just going to make them do what we want them to do. And if they don't like it, they can quit. And then, Blockstream can pick up the slack on the network for them, right? And then, yeah, fucking assholes. I swear to Christ. And they wonder why the majority of the network basically hasn't upgraded. I don't know. I can't imagine why these people are even involved in Bitcoin. I really don't. I mean, really, if you want that kind of payment system, just use fucking Visa. They've got all of that complexity. They've got all of that bullshit. And as a matter of fact, they've got all the regulatory shit covered. Trying to reinvent the wheel by making another Visa for Visa to buy. I mean, that's fucking stupid. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down into some music. And I haven't been playing enough Black Dahlia Murder. And so here we go. A little bit of Nightbringers here on Coin Metal. And that was Prong with Beg to Differ. And seeing as we are kind of rounding it down, I did see this one article posted up by Countess on the old Twitter there. And I wanted to follow it up because, you know, it is along the lines of what we've been talking about tonight. And this one's on the Register, of all places, under the Security tab. Intel's commitment to making its stuff secure is called into question. Security is a process, or at least an aspiration. And this is authored by Thomas Claiborne in San Francisco. October 8th, 2018 at 7:02. No indication of AM or PM. Bad on you, Thomas. Intel claims that, quote, "protecting our customers' data and ensuring the security of our products is a top priority for the semiconductor giant." However, security researcher Stefan Kanthak argues otherwise. In an email to the Register in response to our report about the problems posed by the manufacturing mode in Intel's management engine, which it left open leaves processors vulnerable to a local attack, Kanthak called Intel's statement, quote, "a blatant lie." The statement is typical PR and, as such, of no value, he said. That may be a bit excessive, but since the Spectre and Meltdown side-channel processor vulnerabilities were disclosed earlier this year, affecting AMD, ARM, Intel, and others, Intel has made a concerted effort to pay more attention to security, or at least to talk about it more. It has gone from insisting the identified exploits are not the result of bugs or flaws, and pointing out that other chip makers are also affected, to hiring crisis PR firm Sard Verbanen and Co., forming a product security group called Intel Product Assurance and Security, or IPAS, delivering a series of patches and implementing design changes in its Whiskey Lake and forthcoming Cascade Lake chips. The Register hears from those close to Chipzilla's inner workings that the Corp is sincere in its desire to make its products more secure. Whether that sentiment translates into the ability to deliver on that desire can be debated. Certainly, Intel has adopted organizational changes to improve its security posture, but Kanthak argues the chipmaker's supposed security zeal hasn't spread throughout the company. Quote, the PSIRT is rather busy since Spectre/Meltdown, and the response times increased notably, he said, noting that he's been in regular contact with the security group for many years. Quote, but Intel is not a one-man show. There are many independent groups and departments which create drivers and applications and their installers. The people who work on Spectre/Meltdown are typically not those who write Windows drivers or applications. It's Intel's Windows-oriented software that most concerns Kanthak, in keeping with his efforts to encourage Microsoft to stop building Windows installers with vulnerable tools. He recently published disclosure about Intel's extreme tuning utility as an example of the chipmaker's slipshod approach. The initial bug report was made on September 4th, 2017, and with no response was resent again on March 22, 2018. Intel issued a supposed fix without any security advisory on May 22, 2018, but the vulnerability remained. There was a follow-up bug report on June 5, 2018, and on September 11, 2018. Intel refixed its code, this time with an advisory. As further evidence that Intel is slow to respond to security issues, he provided the Register with a baker's dozen of other bug reports for Intel software that were submitted in June, with the proviso that we not publish details because Intel hasn't fixed some of the flaws. Intel code may also be vulnerable to an issue reported last year in Microsoft's .NET framework that Microsoft has declined to fix. After the release of Windows Vista, Intel started to use .NET framework in many of its drivers' GUI applications, said Kanthak. Since these applications need to be run elevated, they all allow this trivial escalation of privilege, or UAC bypass. The Register asked Intel for a response to Kanthak's criticism. The chipmaker offered this statement via email. Protecting our customers and their data continues to be a critical priority for us. We followed the principles of coordinated disclosure to deploy mitigations and inform the public. Given the nature of our products, we commonly work with our customers and other third parties, including hardware, software, and service vendors, as well as end users, to develop and deploy mitigations. Effective mitigation may require all these parties to work together in coordinated cooperation. Regarding CSME, the ME is one firmware under the umbrella of Converged Security and Management Engine. Intel recently consolidated CSME updates into quarterly packages to simplify the update process and improve predictability for our customers and partners. This makes it simpler for them to validate and apply fixes and make them available to end users. In other words, security can be slow. So there you have it. You can't even... one thing I'd like to point out about this, we are finding out about this stuff, about these hardware hacks, or hardware vulnerabilities and firmware vulnerabilities, after the NSA and other intelligence agencies made demands of hardware manufacturers to specifically put fucking back doors and shit so that they can circumvent things like encryption and so on and so forth and gain access to anybody's computer. So it should not surprise anybody that we are finding exactly that. Issues in firmware, issues in hardware that can easily circumvent our ability to take control of our finances or our computers. And you know, it's very, very sad. This could have all been prevented. It's much like the I think this is going to end up just like the drug war, where now about 80 years after pretty much or not 80 years, but at least 30 years of blanket prohibition, we're starting to see the permission being handed down from the FDA and whatnot for things like studies on psychedelics. Those we haven't been able to do those since like 1969 or something like that. But I think that hardware and software development is going to go through a similar kind of like renaissance, you know, where we are going to start seeing people questioning more things like their operating system, where they're going to be looking at the fact that they could, say, download a variant of Ubuntu and modify it as they wish and then redistribute it to others. I believe that this is going to be an increasing trend where people are going to be seeking other operating systems or seeking to create other operating systems that simply do not have these security issues. You know, that they aren't as dependent on the I don't know how to say this, the the kind of institutional corruption of software and hardware, I guess. I mean, we've seen this in Linux already, where it's probably the fastest growing operating system as far as adoption is concerned on the planet. And it's because it's open and it's free for you to download, modify, and redistribute. If it weren't, Tesla probably wouldn't use it. It probably wouldn't be in any of Tesla's cars. It probably wouldn't be on any of Samsung's devices. Google wouldn't have made their own variant, so on and so forth. It all comes from free software, and the freer we can keep this space, the more secure it will be. Because the number of people that it affects won't be limited to just some little cadre of people or some little echelon of people that aren't connected with the rest of us. You know, when they're in that position, we can be subject to issues that are arising. But think about it this way. Think about the footprint of your CPU, your Intel CPU. And then think about this super micro attack thing that was recently unveiled. And think about all the capabilities of that itty bitty tiny microscopic chip. But you still have to have this huge fucking processor and its huge ass footprint to give you about 3 gigahertz worth of processing power. Now, I'd be willing to bet that a great deal of that is actually wasted by some bullshit firmware in the background, and you're not getting the full yield out of the processing power of your own hardware that you pay for. That's just my perception, though. Anyway, it is with that I'd like to close out this episode. We will be back again on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I'd like y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. And watch out for your own bunghole, because it might just have a super micro device implanted into it, and gotta be checking for that kind of thing. Anyway, thank you very, very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support. And like I said, we will be back again on Wednesday. And so until then, y'all have an excellent evening. And as far as our last dance, man, I'm so tempted, but it would take us way too far. I'm trying to find something short and sweet. I know what we'll go with. System of a Down, Bounce. because it's short, it's sweet, and it gets it done. So here we go, bounce. Y'all have an excellent evening.